The story that you are about to hear is a compilation of documented true facts, featuring characters, events, or places that has played a role in shaping history. Please sit back and listen as I recite this narrative for you. Javed Iqbal was a Pakistani serial killer who was found guilty of the sexual abuse and murder of 100 children. Iqbal strangled the victims, dismembered the corpses, and dissolved them in acid as a way to conceal the evidence. He was found guilty and sentenced to death in the same manner that he killed the boys, being strangled first, then cut into 100 pieces in front of the parents of the victims, one piece for each victim, then be dissolved into acid. But he committed suicide before the sentence could be carried out. Iqbal was the sixth of 8 children of his businessman father, born on October 5, 1956 in Lahore, Pakistan. He attended Government Islamic College, Railway Road, Lahore as an intermediate student. In 1978, while still a student, he started a steel recasting business. Iqbal lived along with boys in a villa in Shadbagh, which his father had purchased for him. When his father died in 1933, he inherited a huge amount of money, roughly around 3 million rupees, which allowed him to live a life of luxury. He was able to buy a massive house and 4 different vehicles, as well as opening different businesses designed to meet young boys and teenagers. Iqbal claimed that his victims were runaways or orphans that lived in the streets in Lahore. He would abduct his victims to his house, then he would sodomize them first before strangling them to death. He would later dismember the corpse of his victims using a kukri, a knife or machete used by the Nepalese or Indian army. The knife is also used in certain traditional rites, such as weddings. To get rid of the bodies, he would submerge the remains in vats of hydrochloric acid and would later dump them in the nearby river when the bodies have liquefied. In several instances, Iqbal lured his victims by leaving money on the floor of his video store business. And whenever a child would pick up the money, he would accuse him of theft and would take him to a room where he would sodomize the child, making the child believe that it was his punishment for stealing. Iqbal was also able to meet other victims through pen pal programs. He would look for pen pals on various magazines and would later on correspond with them. He would convince them to send pictures of themselves and would choose which among his pen pals are the best looking. He would send gifts to them and when the time is right, would meet with them and sexually abuse them. In 1998, Iqbal and his employee Arbab were robbed and beaten up by one of his employees. Iqbal suffered a severe head injury, leading him to be hospitalized for 22 days. Immediately after his hospitalization, Iqbal was arrested and charged with sodomy. Arbab's family filed a case against Iqbal. However, he was granted bail. Due to his hospitalization bills, most of Iqbal's property was sold to cover for his medical care. This led to him moving out to the slums of Lahore, where he would later commit one of the greatest crimes known in the history of Pakistan. In December 1999, Iqbal sent a letter to police and a Lahore newspaper chief news editor, Kawar Naeem Hashmi, confessing to the rape and murder of 100 runaway boys, all aged between 6 and 16. When the police went inside Iqbal's house, they found bloodstains on the walls and floor, along with the chain with which Iqbal claimed to have strangled his victims and photographs of many of his victims in plastic bags. These items were neatly labeled with handwritten pamphlets. 2 vats of acid with partially dissolved human remains were also left in the open for police to find, with a note claiming the bodies in the house have deliberately not been disposed of so that authorities will find them. Iqbal confessed in his letter that he planned to drown himself in the Ravi River following his crimes, but after unsuccessfully dragging the river with nets, police launched the largest manhunt in Pakistan history. 4 accomplices, teenage boys who had shared Iqbal's 3-bedroom flat, were arrested in Sohawa. Within days, one of them died in police custody, with a post-mortem suggesting that force had been used against him. Allegedly, he jumped from a window. Iqbal's motive for committing his murders was his infuriation at a perceived injustice at the hands of Lahore police, who had arrested him on charges relating to an act of sodomy against a young runaway boy in the 1990s. No charges were brought in relation to this offense. His mother had been forced to watch his decline before suffering a fatal heart attack. He had therefore resolved to make 100 mothers cry for their sons, as his mother had been forced to do for him before her death. It was a month before Iqbal turned himself in at the offices of the Urdu language newspaper Daily Jang on December 30, 1999. He was subsequently arrested. He stated that he had surrendered to the newspaper because he feared for his life and was concerned that the police would kill him. An employee of the Daily Jang mentioned that Iqbal had no remorse for what he did, claiming that he hated this world and was not ashamed of his actions and that he was ready to die. After Iqbal's arrest, parents who have reported their sons or young male relatives' disappearance were contacted. The police and parents would rummage through the plastic bags containing the clothes of Iqbal's victims, which would confirm their identities. During his 6-month killing spree, Iqbal kept a detailed account of the murders, listing his victims' names, ages, and the dates of their deaths. He also kept their shoes and bundles of their clothing. He also recorded the exact cost of disposing of each kid. In terms of expenses, including the acid, it cost me 120 rupees or $2.40 to erase each victim, he wrote. Although his diary contained detailed descriptions of the murders, and despite the handwriting on the placards in his house matching Iqbal's, he claimed in court that he was innocent and that the entire affair was an elaborate hoax to draw attention to the plight of runaway children from poor families. He claimed that his statements to police were made under duress. Over 100 witnesses testified against Iqbal, and he and his accomplices were found guilty. Iqbal was sentenced to death by hanging. The judge passed sentence saying, "You will be strangled to death in front of the parents whose children you killed. Your body will then be cut into 100 pieces and put in acid, the same way you killed the children." It's rare that serial killers act in the company of others. But this was the case with Javed Iqbal, who had not just one, but 3 accomplices total. The mastermind behind one of the most brutal cases of murder in history didn't do it without help. But he didn't recruit grown adult men who could possibly turn him in. He needed people who would fall under his dark sphere of influence. He found that in runaway teenage boys, not unlike the ones he killed. Shahid Ahmed was just a 17-year-old boy but was Iqbal's main accomplice nonetheless. 2 other youths were named as accomplices as well, and all 3 were brought to trial for the killing of 100 boys. Mamad Nadim, age 15, would be found guilty of 13 murders and receive a sentence of 14 years for each murder, for a total of 182 years. Mamad Sabir was only 13 years old upon sentencing and received a total of 63 years in prison for his deeds. On the morning of October 8, 2001, Iqbal and his accomplice, Shahid Ahmed, were found dead in their cell in the Kot Lakhpat prison. They had apparently committed suicide by hanging themselves with bed sheets, though there has been speculation that they were murdered. Autopsies revealed that they had been beaten prior to death. Iqbal is considered the serial killer with the most victims in Pakistan's history as an independent nation. Hey everyone! I just wanted to express how grateful I am that you took the time to listen to my narration. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I am Twysted Mind, and please enjoy the rest of your day. Salamat!